Welcome to Under the Rug at Work, where we shine light on things that are normally swept under the rug. Today, I'm chatting with Fay Calderone about autoimmune disease at work. Fay is the author of two books on psychosocial safety at work and a partner at Hall and Wilcox, and this is a super interesting topic. Thank you, Fay, for joining me. I'm really keen to chat about this.
Thanks so much, Nicole. And me too. It's my first time talking about this as a confined topic, so very exciting.
Yes, but before we kind of caught up, we were talking about a number of different topics that we could talk about in law, in psychosocial safety, in, your books. And we landed on this because
Yeah.
you have lived experience and it is impacting so many workplaces and so many workers. So this will be a really valuable discussion. But before we jump into that, can you just tell us a little bit about your background and your books, why you wrote them, what they're about? I'd love to hear more.
I'll try and summarize it quickly and so we can get to the fun stuff. But yeah, so 25-year employment lawyer, so working across workplace discrimination and safety. So advising mostly in predominantly employers, private, public sector, larger employers of late. Have been sort of the focus areas on everything and anything that touches the workplace. And then, of course, when things go wrong, as they always will, when we're
Yeah.
dealing with the human condition, dealing on the defence side with discrimination claims, general protections claims, unfair dismissal, and all of those things. But what I've tried to do, sort of at least in the last decade, instead of just putting out the fires, so to speak, is try to take a bit more of a diagnostic lens, a more proactive lens, and have conversations with leaders about, what are the root causes of these issues? What could be going wrong? How can we try and work on our compliance and our culture and our leadership to try and avoid matters escalating and the dysfunction that ensues, including legal cases and costs and reputational risk. So that's really where a framework called Beyond Compliance was born, which led to culminated in Broken to Safe, which is my first book, which is about tackling toxic workplace cultures and burnout. Oh, yeah. But you were going to get a tissue. I've reduced you to tears already.
I'm literally reading it right now.
Very cool. Yes, that's kind of like life's work and tries to demystify the law. It was also happening at a time when, frankly, beyond compliance was becoming compliance. The,
Mhm.
code of practice into psychosocial hazards, the respect at work laws. I always spoke about DEI and various other, cultural things as being proactive, but because of the respect at work laws and the positive duty, that was becoming more proactive. As a matter of law, and so people were quite overwhelmed by it. And Broken to Safe is a pretty simple book and an attempt to just provide a handy little reference guide for HR leaders and HR practitioners, leaders, and anyone that really manages a person. As it turns out, based on private messages that I've been getting for the last couple of years, it seems to have resonated with workers as well and people that just have had negative experiences in the workplace and sort of seems to have enlightened them about, oh, so that's what was going on or that's what they should have done, and not so much to take it on and run the case, but to have an appreciation, I suppose, and protect themselves from harm for future encounters. So finally, in terms of you did say books, I've got another book coming out which is called Rise Up, which is a guide to leading with inclusion. Different book in that it was not born out of my life's work and an accumulation. It was very, very much blank page and frustration with the state of the world. And what I thought was the positive trajectory we were on in terms of diversity, equity, and inclusion, and creating what I always talk about, which is safe, healthy, and inclusive workplaces and respectful workplaces.
Mhm.
With the geopolitical environment, impact on social cohesion, just a lot of backlash that we're seeing against DEI initiatives. made me sort of drove me to sort of start having conversations with people. I think I spoke to 16 experts or people with lived experience, leaders, like media personalities, crazy, amazing people that I spoke to, that I was on, and had gave me the time for this book. And it's an intersectional lens. It looks at everything from disability to class to neurodiversity to self-determined First Nations chapter, and really looks at the issue, sort of what are the barriers, what are the risks, and how do we address them, and creates a RISE framework, which is about resisting silence and regression and really eliciting a call to action, not just for the benefit of the humans that we, are entrusted with in our workplaces, but also to have better high-performing workplaces and societies.
Yeah.
That's
And that's what,
a lot, sorry.
no, but that's what workplaces want, right? They want to know how to prevent it so that they can have a high performing workplace and a high performing team, and then understand DEI better. And I can say, reading your book, it doesn't sound like a lawyer has written it.
And
There's
the
no there's no legalese, like it is quite simple. And yeah, the feedback I would share is exactly what you just said as well. Like to be able to look at something and go, oh, that makes sense and that's easy to implement. Like that's what workplaces want. Yes, we've got to comply, and yes, there is a bit of a checklist that you can do to do that, but it's about going into detail, understanding what the causes of these things are to be able to stop them at the cause rather than trying to band-aid the symptom.
That's exactly right.
Yeah. And I think it leads really well into what we're talking about today, because it can have such a big impact on the workplace and the worker. And look, you've got an autoimmune disease. Can you
Yeah.
just share a little bit about your experience of living with that?
Yeah. I've accumulated a few. So I had my first diagnosis when I was a teenager. I collapsed and went off to hospital and got misdiagnosed with pleurisy. And then it turned out I actually had Hashimoto's and was probably born with it because my thyroid had stopped working. So that was the first organ to be attacked. And at sort of every other juncture throughout my life, high stress periods, illnesses, intense work environments, COVID, that I seem to have added to them. We've had everything from alopecia. I've got alopecia on top of that, Sjogren's, Raynaud's came out, some heart complications that we thought isolated came out, and then that ended up being part of this umbrella of scleroderma, which is systemic scleroderma, which I have, and it was World Scleroderma Day the other day as well. So shout out to the advocates and all they do in that space. I'm actually, I think, one of the lucky ones, frankly, from all the things I see online in terms of, sort of the diffuse scleroderma and some of the really horrible aspects of the disease, and how quickly it can progress. Mine has been slow progressing, but
Mhm.
still just chronic and constant. And then I had some endo as well, and then a reactive arthritis last year, which they say again is all sort of part of the scleroderma, but not. The thing with autoimmune disease is it's not in the box. It's not like you can go stage 1, stage 2, and you've track it. Everybody, the more I talk to people, the more I realize that sort of everybody seems to accumulate them, and it takes a different course. And despite it being a lot, a bit like playing whack-a-mole most of the time, in terms of where the symptoms are going to come from.
Yeah.
On balance, not tragic. So very, very lucky in that sense.
You have said so many words that I've never heard before. And
But clearly, I
um,
don't demystify medicine. I read a lot more medical journals than I read legal journals nowadays. Nowadays, I'll have you know.
and you would love it too. Like,
I love it. I'm like, oh, only valid sources. Thank you.
yeah.
Such
Um,
symptoms.
And look, I'm going to say what you've probably heard before from many people and what other people think and may not say, but you look fine. You look well. And it's an invisible thing, right? Like it's an invisible disease, but it still has a diseases. It still has an incredible impact on the workplace. And I don't even think it's in discussions when we
Mm,
have psychosocial safety discussions. Do you
no.
want to chat a little bit about the
Yeah,
impact of disease, this, invisible diseases at work and having those discussions?
yeah. I'll be completely frank. Like I didn't talk about it historically. I think the first time I ever wrote about it was in uh an article for Marina Go and gosh, Tonic magazine, which
Mm.
is sort of a middle-aged women. It was the ex-Dolly people, publishers, editors that then did Tonic magazine, which was more for middle-aged women. And I talked about mastering the art of enough and sort of how chronic disease and sort of perfectionism layered led me to master, to have to really pull back and decide what I say yes, what I say no to. Otherwise, you say no to everything because you fall over, right?
Yeah.
Um, and that was the first time I started to talk about it. But when I really started to talk about it was COVID. And a lot of people did because suddenly the invisible became visible, right? You
Mm.
saw who had the mask on in the office or in an environment where other people, forget when we were all in masks, but, sort of there was who was more vulnerable, who had to work from home because they were vulnerable, it just really brought a visibility to autoimmune disease that for all its horrible, obviously, things that happened through COVID, I think it was part of the start of an important conversation in the context of the workplace. But of course, it was a conversation about the physical
Yeah.
elements. I think we're pretty good with the physical elements. Like, when I had this reactive arthritis last year, I had my hands sort of when it was at its highest in slings, in whatever they are, splints.
Yeah.
And sort of very quickly work got me a mouse, and I didn't even think to ask for a mouse, but sort of it made sense. And I think we're good to adjust the chairs and get the mice. And we're getting better at flexible work. So not just work from home, but also flexible start and finish times, or 3 or 4 days a week, which is important because the longer and harder you run, the longer and harder you fall with
Yeah.
autoimmune disease. So, depending on disease progression, depending on, sort of what type of job people are working in and what other things they have in their life,
Mm.
like children take up a bit of space, unfortunately. It might be that sort of flexibility means that they can endure the marathon rather than, put in the TPD claim or retire early. What we don't do, and to be honest, it wasn't until we started talking about it that I really thought about it. We don't risk assess based on sort of stress and the impact that stress has on people living with autoimmune disease. And we know from all the medical journals that we read, and from private discussions with my wonderful rheumatologist and immunologist, that stress is absolutely a factor in flare-ups and disease progression. And I think if people make those disclosures to their employers, the employers are on notice and therefore they're on risk. So things like really long working hours for protracted periods of time, travel, sort of long haul flights, or even sort of travel to Perth and back, I find knocks me out. Like, so I'm mainly sort of risk assessing based on sort of what my experiences have been. Like, I know one of the things that I did was a really early days, which was one of my first sort of flare ups, was a investigation in Newcastle actually for a large client, and we there was an asbestos exposure. So back in the day, clearly no one risk assessed it. I worked out of my hotel room. We closed the bedroom doors, and I had about 40 people who had been exposed to asbestos on my own through my room as an early 20-year-old. After that, and I typed statements all night. I was meeting these people all day and typing statements all night. I came back from that and I got some sort of a respiratory disease, like not disease, like respiratory cold thing because aircon and whatever, stress, no sleep.
Yeah.
Um, and for about a solid year, I was fainting, like my blood pressure dropped. I had to go on steroids. It's still a bit of a mystery, but like I fainted in every station from Emu Plains to the CBD. Like I'd gone to every hospital in the Sydney metropolitan region. This was pre-diagnosis, and now then the heart thing came up later. So we're like, oh, but it was a very intense period of work, both in terms of the physical hours that I worked and the stress. It was like a lot of stress and carrying that stress for people that were worried that not just they had been exposed, but their spouses had come, their children had come because they'd been exposed to the clothes and various other aspects of it. Sorry, very long answer, but you just got me thinking about all this.
That's great.
Yeah.
It's really great. And honestly, I could just listen for hours because your experience, your lived experience, and then the outcomes. I mean, if we someone without an autoimmune disease gets stressed, we feel it. I know what my body does when I get to that. I'm short. I'm not as happy as normal. It impacts my sleep. I know what that list is, but for someone with an autoimmune disease, that can trigger a flare up, which can knock you out, which can make you pass out. It can put you in hospital. Like there's such a huge variety of what could happen. And I really don't think that workplaces know where to start, let alone know what to do and what not to do. From your experience, obviously, in employment law, you've seen what is not done so well, and also what can be done well as well with your lived experience. What does that look like? What does what a workplace does well look like and not
Yeah.
so well? Can you give us some examples?
I think we have
That
to start
terrible
with,
question.
and no, you're absolutely, it's a good question. I think to do it well, we need to start with a foundation of trust, and it's like all
Mm,
disclosures, right? Would
mm,
be the same if you're talking about mental health or neurodivergence. So to start with a foundation of trust so that people, when you say, do you have any medical conditions or, or illness that may impact your ability to perform the inherent requirements of your role? And if so, what reasonable adjustments can you make? At that time, people can make the disclosure or they cannot make
yeah.
disclosure, of course. If they do make the disclosure, and we don't need to be so clinical about it. I think it's less taboo. I think autoimmune disease is less taboo than saying you've got bipolar, for example,
Mm,
but may not be disclosed by the same token because people just don't. They might not even be alive to, sort of how important it is to disclose it until it sort of progresses down the track. But if you can have the relationship with your workers, that they have that trust, they either disclose it at the outset or they disclose it later on when they do have a flare up. It's almost inevitable if you've got a team member that has autoimmune disease that at some stage a physical illness or a stressful period, a death in the family, whatever it is going to occur, either at work or outside of work, that will trigger a flare up, which will usually lead to a disclosure, particularly if there needs to be a long period of work, off work. I think we're good at ensuring that people don't, their employment isn't terminated because of the temporary absence due to illness or injury, and we've got that 3-month protection, even though it's not always paid. It is a protection, and we've got that protection at law. We have disability discrimination laws, how many people were sued and what you can do with it, and sort of general protections claims is the other protection that you have, like under the Fair Work Act. It's there as a protective mechanism, and from a compliance point of view, you absolutely need to not prejudice someone's employment because they've made the disclosure. I don't think we then go the next step of more proactively. Like if there is a reactive situation, I think we're pretty good at accommodating or sort of at making sure that people are given the time and space to recover and return to work without detriment. I
Hmm.
don't think we're good at sort of trying to more proactively manage those situations. And I have, if we're talking about sort of the worst sort of things we see, it's like, when a disclosure is made, people go, oh, well, then we need to terminate them because they haven't made that disclosure to us on their pre-employment questionnaire, and that's fraud. I'm like, that's not fraud, mate. So,
And that's what they're worried about, which is why they don't say anything, right?
so you wouldn't hire them. But so that's kind of the bad in terms of, yeah, it's an interesting one, and I don't think one that we have fully developed our that fully grappled with as work health and safety professionals, like broadly, like
Yeah.
not just lawyers, because I don't think sort of maybe the perception is there isn't the critical mass, or perhaps when the issues do arise, they may then be more alive to the risks and then become more proactive about it. But I don't think it's something front of mind that people will have as a line item on their risk assessment sheet when they start to have a conversation about what are the psychosocial hazards in the workplace. Nor do I think it features as specific, sort of frame of reference in the code of practice.
No.
Yeah.
There's many gaps, and it's not meant to be a Bible, right? Like it's not meant to cover all of
Yeah,
them. It's meant to be a starting point.
exactly.
But trust is a huge thing because if
Yeah,
the worker doesn't trust that the information will be accepted and they'll be supported,
yeah,
that's why we don't disclose. And trust is built in time, not immediately. So I think what I'd love to know from you in your experience as well, for someone who's managing if they have an autoimmune disease, what's one thing that they can do to better manage their energy, reduce the stress, but potentially have that conversation as well so that they are supported if something happens?
yeah. It's an endurance game, and I
Mm.
think that I think I said it earlier. Like the longer and harder you run, the
Yeah.
the harder and longer the fall. So it really is about endurance, and it's taken me a very long time to learn this. Like I've been working full time since '99, and I had two like 6 month stints off with each of the boys. So it's been a long time. And we do like to. I mean, if you are ambitious and you have a career, and it's beyond that. It's not just even personal. It's about not letting people down, not letting the team down, not saying, I have this thing where I find it so difficult to say no. Like all these years later, two little letters, and I can't, it takes so much energy for me to say them, but it's so important to do
Mm.
it
Yep.
because the more you say yes to, the more
Mm.
you by default are saying no to. And that's usually, I mean, family, although they have their way of emerging from the wilderness and taking all your time and energy and attention. Sorry, I have teen boys, so um, it's still not just mean, um, but it's usually going to be extra sleep,
Mm.
the yoga that you want to do, the massage that you want to have, all those just time and space that you need to breathe. And if you take away those which things which appear to be non-essential, it does affect your endurance, and it does affect your mindset,
Mm.
and it does affect, sort of mean that you get into that amygdala hijack mode
Mm.
quicker, you lose clarity, you're more stressed, and then when you are stressed, most aside from all the other risks that everybody knows about with stress, in autoimmune disease, you then have a potential physical manifestation of that stress in the form of a flare up, whatever. They're so varied, but in my case, like I said last year, it was having the hands. I couldn't open a door. I couldn't do up a button. Like it was, couldn't pick up a pan. So inconvenient. I couldn't cook. But, I could type mysteriously.
Yeah, interesting.
I could type because it was my fingers, whereas it was all the stuff. I was writing riser. I was rising up with my little fingers.
Good use of time, which is probably what you were thinking, right?
It was.
Well, from the other side of things, what can leaders or employers do to support their workers with autoimmune issues? What can they do better or do today if they're going, oh, I don't even know if my team has autoimmune or they need to start from somewhere?
Yeah, and look, there'll be some out there that say, I don't want to know because the more I know, the more I need to accommodate. So
They're
that's
probably not listening.
that's probably not here.
Yeah.
Um, I think education and awareness campaigns are important. We do a lot, like I said, on mental health and it's emerging on neurodivergence. I think it might be one of the next frontiers. It just baffles me that neither you or I, as people that are so alive to these issues, haven't spoken
Yeah.
about it and almost just came up with this as a concept. I think having something around it doesn't have to be a specific. Obviously, you're not going to have something about scleroderma in the workplace. It's so rare. But something around chronic illness and autoimmune disease, perhaps,
Mm.
in your wellbeing sort of series that you in the way that you educate your
Mm.
employees and sort of encourage them to speak up and encourage them to share their experiences, encourage them to make disclosures, and then, of course, in turn, accommodate those. When we're talking about everyone must come back to the office, all of these sort of directives. Be
Mm.
aware that there might be people in there that if you insist on a full-time return to the office, it may affect their ability to stick with you for the long
Mm.
term. They could also make a flexible work request and run off to the Fair Work Commission if you deny it and try and enforce and seek, to establish that there were not reasonable business grounds to refuse it because obviously they've got a disability. They're entitled to make that request, provided they've been there for 12 months. There's a legal answer,
Mm.
but isn't the broader answer that they can be their authentic self, that they feel included and supported by the workplace. They're going to be more loyal to you. The
Yeah.
more any workplace has given me sort of, what I would consider accommodations or grace to recover,
Mm.
has, I can assure you that I have repaid in
Yeah.
spades in commitment, loyalty, being brand ambassador, all of those things.
Yeah.
So, and I do, I mean, it's not, it's not something to shy away from. I don't think anyone should be shy about talking about the fact that they have autoimmune disease, and I don't think it's something that you should worry. Like employers should be like, "Oh no, I don't want to touch anyone with autoimmune disease." Well, frankly, it's so varied and they're so common, and
Yeah.
you'd be excluding a large portion of your workforce,
Yeah.
potential workforce. But yeah,
Yeah. And I think they say that because, or they think that, they feel that if you disclose and they go, well, it's not you, it's this reason, and they
yeah,
may, choose another, and it's really hard to sometimes identify that that was the discrimination. The
yeah,
reason that that happens is because they're worried that the worker's not going to be able to do the work.
yeah,
And trust and communication, as you said, is so important. And I think from experience and with other psychosocial hazards and team issues and what happens in workplaces, being able to build trust with your team is so imperative. And
yeah,
then for someone, if they really, from my perspective, I look at it and go, you should be able to have a good enough relationship with your manager that you can disclose.
right.
And you should so that they've got your back. That's the kind of team that you want, right? We've got each other's backs.
How we
And
are.
yeah, to be able to say, hey, I've got this and
Mm.
I need these boundaries or these things because of that. So I can't work past, -4 degrees, or this time, or like
Oh,
actually giving
yeah.
not only the what it is, but the solution. I think if you come with
Yeah.
solutions and say, I work my best when XYZ, I might have a
Yeah.
flare up if I do LMNP. Like, if you can say,
Just reminded me of this is exactly right. And you have just reminded me of something that I've forgotten for so long. My firstborn is 19. When I was pregnant with him, it was when Raynaud's had started. So I don't know if you know what Raynaud's is, but that's like all your fingers go white and your bone chilling cold. A lot of people have got it. It's pretty common, but it was sort of, like I said, one of the early signs that I didn't sort of connect the dots on. But I was so cold all the time. And I was based, I won't say where I was based. I was in a CBD office, and I got my first and only warning in my entire career. Do you want to know why?
go.
I got so frustrated. I can't believe I've forgotten about this. I got so frustrated because we kept asking for the air conditioning to be adjusted because I was freezing. And of course, there's others in the building that perhaps were not. They were wearing, sort of three-piece suits as men and stuff. Well, I decided to take the air conditioning system into my own hands. I climbed on, this was back when we had big offices to ourselves too. So I took the liberty as a pregnant woman of climbing onto my desk and bulldog clipping like this big shawl that I had around me. I had multiple of them, bulldog clipping them to the air vents so that it just wasn't blowing on me, a gale on me anymore. First aid didn't go down. Well, it wasn't a written warning, but it was a very sister talking to.
Look, you probably should have got like a giant person to do that for you. Being pregnant and on the desk is a bit of a worry.
Exactly, exactly. I'm not saying it was my brightest or best moment, but when you said cold temperatures, I was like, oh my gosh.
But
Nowadays, I'm all like, oh, is it hot in here? What is going on? But back then, we could talk for weeks on this.
we could. But it's just understanding, hey, this is the thing. I'm okay. This is when I'm not okay, and this will help me to not get to not okay. And we should
Mm,
be able to do that, whether we've got an autoimmune disease or not. Your manager should be able to do that as well. Like we
yeah.
work with people, we should be supporting each other.
That's right. And it's easier to do, I think, although
It
we
is.
say there's that question in the pre-employment questionnaire, it's definitely easier to do as you build trust. Like I think
Yeah.
anyone who's worked with me or in our team broadly for a couple of months tends to open up about anything and everything, sort of that, not just our team, a lot of people around this firm, like you can see that it's sort of stay true is one of our values. It's a pretty authentic environment. The more you talk, the more people talk. Like, so the more you
Yeah.
give you, the more you get.
Yeah.
So clearly, if you're working for someone that is talking openly about these issues and doesn't, sort of pretend that, it's nothing or, just have mystery leave all the time,
Yeah.
then it just becomes less taboo and people feel more comfortable to talk about it. It's like that
Yeah.
whole thing of I'm going off to pick up my kids, when we used to say I'm off to another meeting.
Yes.
You
Yes.
turn off site at 3 o'clock every day.
Or I know, right? And you are so right that we could really talk about this all day. And why don't we just throw it out there? If people want us to do a second episode on this, and if there's anything specific that you would like us to chat about or delve into, whether it's the legislation, whether it's what managers need to do, whether it's what teams can do, whether it's what the individual can do, let us know. Because
Case studies too, like we can
case
talk
study,
about
yeah,
flexible work,
yes,
discrimination claims, what are reasonable adjustments,
yeah,
general protections, when does that kick in? But, we didn't want to make it a 101 of the law. We wanted to sort of
yeah,
open up the conversation. And then if you've got real case studies, by all means share them and we can
yeah.
have another conversation and make it tangible or interactive even.
Yes, Yes, I love it. Yes, tell us what you think, and we will go down that track. But Faye, thank you so much for being so open and sharing. This has been an incredible pod. Where can people connect with you, learn more about your work, and buy your books?
Oh, thank you. Just my name. So Fay Calderone. I'm at LinkedIn. I've got a website by that name, Instagram, TikTok. I've got them all. The books have led me down the garden path of
Ah,
all the socials. And yeah, the books are all available online, but that faycalderone.com will get you to the book pages as well. So thank you so much for having me, and thank you for starting what is a important and necessary conversation. I can't wait to hear what we can help people with.
yeah, sounds great. And you'll also see Faye on TV if you turn the TV on recently. Been talking
Yeah.
about the famous people situation that's happening at the moment. But thank you again so much. And for listeners, if you found this conversation valuable, please subscribe and share it. And we will see you next time on Under the Rug at Work, where we continue to shine light on issues that are too often overlooked. Thank you, Faye.
Thank you. See you later.